Hi, I'm Mark Stoudemire, and welcome to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I can't wait for you guys to see what I have in store for you this season. 11 new comics, 11 new stories, unbelievable amount of just advice and just vulnerability about the lives of comedians and how that translates to the jokes that you love to hear on stage. Again, all the content this season will be completely free on my YouTube channel. I just ask that you do me just one small favor. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please rate and review me wherever you review your podcast. I truly appreciate that you guys do that for me. Again, you can also visit me at my website, markstod.com, where you can see all my upcoming show dates, along with any other content that I put out. Again, please leave a comment, like, subscribe to this channel. It means so much to me that you do that. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the joke.
We got the election in 3 weeks. We excited? Yeah. Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Dementia versus demented. Who are we going with? Who are we going with? Interesting. Yeah, let's be real. Joe Biden, a little bit has diet Alzheimer's. Here's the thing, and it's okay to disagree with people because I'm still voting for him, and if you're not, that's okay. You should be able to hear someone voting for a candidate that isn't you and not dislike the person that they say. If you're voting for Donald Trump, I won't dislike you. I don't know why we're now just hate people for how they vote, but that's where it is. So I'm voting for Biden, whatever. But I'll be honest, all of us people who are voting for Biden, the way we feel about Joe Biden is he's like a car where the check engine light is flashing and we just gotta pretend we don't see that shit. Because we need it to get us to the finish line of this long, shitty road trip that is 2020. It's smoking and sputtering. We're like, I don't see anything. This car's totally fine. This car is totally fine. It's not even the car we wanted. The dealership forced this car upon us for some fucking reason. I like the gay car. I thought the gay car was pretty cool. But they're like, no, you take this old car that has a sexual assault allegation. That's the car for you. Okay, I'll drive it. I don't want to. Because what's the alternative? The alternative right now is one of those Mad Max vehicles with a fucking guitarist like, that's our alternative. That's how it feels. And that's a fun car to drive. I don't blame you if you want to drive that car 4 years ago, but I don't know, man.
All right, welcome back to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I'm here with an outstanding comic from New York City, Bret Raybould, who will talk to us today about his ever-expanding BCU, Bret Cinematic Universe, which is amazing. In 2020, he released his debut comedy special, Bret Raybould Retires from Comedy, which you can view for free on YouTube, and debuted at #1 in iTunes comedy charts. Bret is also the only comedian to dub his own special in Mandarin. After his comedy retirement, he briefly pursued a career in singing and released Bret on Buble, also for purchase. Bret Raybould is also the world's first publicly traded comedian, which we're definitely going to get into. He co-wrote a screenplay called Race the Movie, which is awesome. He is the host of 2 podcasts, Oh Dear and Just the Plugs, and is one half of the sketch comedy group Brothers Raybould with his comedian brother Jordan. Bret, welcome to Get to the Joke.
Wow, man. That's all the time we have.
Yeah. I want to make sure you do so much. We're going to get into it about the fact that I think you can call yourself a comedy salesman, which is, I think, a very appropriate name that you gave yourself because
Charlatan might be a better word, Mark. A charlatan.
I mean, you do so much. You're always thinking and you're always coming up with new ways of marketing. And that's kind of what the point of the show is to really mine out those people who I think are not only brilliant comics, but also brilliant in the way that they brand themselves and really dissect how you do it. But I first want to thank you for coming on to this show. I love your special. I love when I met you for the first time with Pedro Gonzalez, who was on our season last season, and then you killed it when you came down and headlined Hershey. So thanks for doing that.
Man, well, first off, I appreciate you having me on both of those shows. They were both great shows. And I remember the one we did with Pedro was like one of my first, if not like my first, like shows back out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I remember like, it was weird because for me, I was like, I can't do anything I record on the special like a year ago after a pandemic. So it's just like, oh boy, this is not going to be my hottest set, but thanks for the stage time, Mark.
No, it was awesome, man. It was awesome, dude. I like to get to know you a little bit because I really only know you from your act, which is why I'm super impressed by you. But I like to get you know you a little bit deeper. The first thing is I would like to know if you can give us a little bit of taste of your life growing up, because when I look at the pedigree of the Raybould family, I see a legal counsel for a U.S. senator, 2 doctors, and 2 comics. But to be fair, your brother was a stockbroker before comic. You're really the only first full-time comic. So give me some perspective into the life of this Raybould family growing up, and then kind of how you kind of charted out your own kind of path into creativity, where your rest of your siblings went into more like, professional, postgraduate.
More actually contributing to society type of things.
That's not true. You do just as much contribution. Trust me.
That's right. And don't let him forget it. First off, I appreciate the word pedigree. Thank you so much for the Raybould pedigree. My siblings are all overachievers. They're all incredibly smart and hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in my family is funny. I think when you have a pretty big family, one of the ways you get attention is jokes. Okay. So it becomes like very part of the language of our family to like constantly be making fun of each other.
Okay.
The dynamics are interesting because it's like at any moment there can be a grouping of 2 or 3 against 2, or there can be just, if it's our parents too, 6-on-1, just roast session. Like there can be different dynamics and little like factions. But I think as far as background, it was like, raised in suburb outside Kansas City, Kansas called Leawood.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I always like try and explain it to people. Like people assume Kansas is like, it's just immediately country. And you're like, no, this is like a well-to-do suburb. Like It's like the Connecticut of Kansas, which is not comparative to Connecticut because that's Connecticut. And they would never say we're the nice Kansas suburb of Connecticut. That's some of the background. I don't know.
Well, no, I was
6'5", 34-inch waist.
Well, I wanted to kind of understand, like, first of all, where are you in the line of these 5 siblings? Are you the youngest? Are you in the middle? I know you're.
By the way, I'm so impressed. How did you know all that? Did we talk about it?
No. I do research before all my interviews. So no,
Mark, you're amazing out of the gate. No one prepares for their podcast like you. The fact that you knew that, I was sitting there going like, do you know who Nardwar is?
I don't.
Have you heard of Nardwar? Oh, Nardwar is this music interviewer who is like super good at his job.
Oh, okay.
And I had that moment where I was like, damn, Mark's like you're not like most comics when they're podcasting. It's just like kind of every comic is like, oh, I only read the headline, and here
Yeah.
you are fucking learning about correctly my family. I'm like, it's just appreciated.
Well, I
What was the
think your
question?
background. Well, I
Yeah.
think the reason I do it. I think your background ends up being why you get into comedy and why you are the type of comic you are. And it's when I see something sticks out to me, like, oh my gosh, he has two siblings are, and not that a comic is a lesser profession, even though you were trying to make a joke about that at the beginning. But when I look at this and I'm thinking, I was like, wow, was there pressure in the Raybould household? Because you went to Wake Forest. That's not a bad school to go. I mean, that's an excellent school. So, like, was there
Sure.
pressure to be super successful in your life? I want to know where you ended up in age-wise. Were you the very youngest? Because I want to see, like, did you have all these older siblings who were doing above and because that puts more pressure on you then at that point. So I was trying to figure out
Yeah.
what that dynamic was for you, Bret, in this household with all these people.
My mom would pressure me to say that there was no pressure, but there, I would say it wasn't like pressure, like you better succeed. I think my parents were truly great at pushing us, with a little sprinkling of pressure, but nothing. What's his name? Tito Jackson. Nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Not. Is that it? Is it Tito Jackson?
Well, you're thinking of Tito's the son. You're thinking of he just
The
died.
dad,
The
Daddy
dad,
Jackson.
Yeah, I can't remember his first name.
Yeah. No, my parents weren't like that. They weren't trying. I am a pedophile though, like Michael. But what if it came out that I was, and now I'm on record, and people are like, "Mark, you didn't do anything about it. you fucking."
I would like the views.
Had the chance.
This would be where it came out. The views would be great.
You'd get to like tweet like, "I have the confession." Oh man. But there was I think my parents like push us to work hard. They're incredibly hardworking people. They teach us the value and the joy of hard work. And my siblings all channeled that into more professional perspectives. I mean, the fact that you knew that even my brother Ryan was works for a senator. I'm like, did we talk about that? And I'm like, we talked for a little after the show, but it's after a show. You don't get to get into it.
Yeah, especially when you have another 3-hour drive back to the city. So
yeah, exactly. And you rejected my sexual advances. Continue.
Well, because I'm wondering, what was your parents' reaction to you then? Because you left Wake Forest and immediately went in to be a full-time comic. There wasn't you weren't like your brother who became a stockbroker and then got fired and then became a comic. You ended up going right to comedy. So what was their reaction when you did a 4-year education at a prestigious college and then went, hey, I'm being a full-time comic? What was that dynamic?
So initially after school, I worked in a newsroom called This. I worked as a producer and editor there.
Okay.
That was my job out of college. Yeah. So I didn't move, it wasn't like I moved to New York and was like full-time comic. I moved to New York and my thinking was I moved to New York because I was like, it's among the best cities, if not the best city for stand-up. Most stage, you'll hear it all the time on comics talk about New York, and I was like, it's the best place to push myself as a comedian. And so for me, moving to New York and having some stability, I was very fortunate. I got that job because it gave me instant stability, and it was a very, very solid gig. Plus, I was doing something creativity adjacent, video editing. I would say video editing is creative, but sometimes when you're in the content churn of a newsroom, it's less about the creativity and more about the output.
Correct. Yeah.
But so I did that and then saved up all the money I had from that so that I could quit, and then go pursue stand-up more immediately. And after some months being in the red, me and my brother were able to get a little bit of some tours going. And after, you dip into the nest a little bit, but but eventually, you start making ends meet. And
Going back to my
yeah.
question, were your parents on board or not on board with you doing this?
You know what? They are like supportive, but also, they're always like, there's, just at a certain point. Then that's the thing, Mark. That's why, like, I feel like I'm very lucky to be in a position where I was able to scrap out a living, but I'm also not a person who has like a career. Do you know what I mean in comedy?
I challenge you on that because yes, there are comics who just do stand-up comedy, but you do so much more than that. This Bret cinematic universe, although you have that as like, hey, it's like a fun thing to say, and it's there you have your hands in many different buckets. You're great at marketing. You're a great businessman, and that's what we're going to talk about too. But
sure.
So I would say you do have a career in comedy. So I would argue that you do have a career.
I appreciate that. But I mean, in terms of like, take the pandemic, like, like a living can be taken away more than a career, like a capital C career.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of that, I mean, I'm obviously now exorbitantly wealthy from stand-up. So I've been personally enriched to the gills. You know what I do like to think about? That's something I was thinking the other day, because admittedly, I feel incredibly lucky to be like, I just feel incredibly lucky. And privileged. So, but I think I've like squandered it. Does that make sense? Like, I think have you ever heard the saying "born on third base"?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it means.
Born on third base means you're born on third base. You're born with advantages.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like I was born on third base, but somehow got thrown out at first. I'm like, wait a minute, I was supposed to be. What the fuck? What the fuck?
Well, let's talk about the pandemic then. So the pandemic hits. Obviously, it doesn't affect your other siblings, but you and your brother are affected. Is there outreach from your family going, hey, are you thinking twice about doing stand-up now that it's been taken away and your sister's literally pulling 23-hour shifts in a hospital somewhere?
I know, right? She's infectious. Yeah.
Yeah. Have there been talks during the pandemic where there's been guilt tripping about, hey, the Rayboulds have steady 9-to-5 jobs, and they, we don't work in seedy, wineries of Hershey, was there pressure?
Total creeps.
Was there pressure when the pandemic hit to find non-work in the arts?
I would say, the unemployment life wasn't that bad.
I
in some ways, and by some I mean many, and by many I mean all, I got in a better financial position during the pandemic than before it, because I wasn't paying any rent. I was living with different random friends and family. And at one point an ex-girlfriend.
Bret, I am sensing an uncomfortability to talk about your parents and your career. Is that on purpose, or is it just like there's nothing there in that well, Mark, let's just move on to something else? Or
what? No, there's no discomfort to talk about it. Have you seen any good movies recently? No, I truly my parents are very supportive. I think they also, my comedy career is like a woman's eggs. There's a moment where they're like, maybe you should think about having a family. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they're like, I'm 30. I got like 4 or 5 more years to hopefully get something more gangbusters.
Yeah.
Going, and I'm taking the steps, I've been stacking firewood, but they're very supportive, and I think they recognize the value of pursuing your dreams and doing it in a very real, driven way, and not just like being fuddly-duddly.
Do you feel pressure to make it before you turn, like, let's say 40?
I kind of do. I feel like a relaxed urgency. Because I don't know. I think I used to put a ton of pressure on myself to like be, you know, I envisioned being more successful by age 30 than I am. And perhaps even in a more extravagant way, as you can have
Is
big
that because you had
dreams when
siblings that were extravagantly successful by age 30, and so you thought that you would have to do the same thing?
yes, all of my siblings made the Forbes 30 and into 30 list.
Well, to be fair, I
Yeah.
and these are unrelated, but I have to be a huge Survivor fan. And I do my research on you and
Oh my
realize that your
God.
sister
He's so good.
was on Survivor. I remember her saying that because she was on a tribe, the quote unquote Goliath tribe, her saying that gave her perspective because growing up, she had so much more, she had so much more than other people did. It gave, put her
Oh, she,
perspective back.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I said, and that's something I'm very like direct about. Part of
Yeah.
the reason, like, coming from like a privileged background, take my life, for example. My parents put me through almost all of college. So I say that to say pursuing something as rocky or as unstable as stand up is easier for me having the entrenched advantage of not having college loans.
Yeah.
Now, make no mistake, that is a ginormous, like, appreciated thing. And make no mistake, my parents, after college, we're like, you're done, which is, I do think that's how it should be, even if you come from a family that's worth tens of millions of dollars, or Jeff Bezos' kids or whatever. But no, I sometimes like say that because I'm like proud and like able to scrape things by and out, but also the reality is some people are put in positions that are easier to pursue an artistic thing than others. Someone like me, if I had college loans, I would not have been able to quit working, save up money from when I worked at now this, to then have a little bit of a nest egg to dip into.
Yeah.
I don't know what my point was. I guess just to contextualize, and whenever you say you're from, I
was like, ask you a question. If you could go back in time, would you rather pay your own way through college so that you would not feel guilty doing what you're doing now? Do you feel like you almost owe your parents now because they put you through college? Oh, okay. All right.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of, there's just like, no, because my belief is I hope to one day put my kids through college if I have kids, and that's a ginormous life gift that my parents gave for me, that not everyone can afford to give their children that, and not by virtue of not being freaking amazing parents. It's just my dad is a doctor and my mom worked as like a furniture refurbishment salesman. Pretty cool creative job my mom had. But like, my dad is also insanely cheap, and putting his 5 kids through college, like it's like this, like the thing I had the privilege of was opportunity, which is the best thing to be privileged about. It wasn't really stuff or things or anything like that. Like I had hand-me-downs my whole life, but I also was able to take guitar lessons and be on a travel soccer team. That as a microcosmic example of.
I feel like this privilege plays out. I feel like, and we'll get to this, the privilege plays out though in your movie that you've written. The fact that if you came from let's say you came from a different background, from the streets of South Compton, maybe you wouldn't come up with Race the Movie at that point because you came from a different set of circumstances. So
maybe, I mean, if we get into that movie I co-wrote, and there's a big update I can tell you on where we're at with that.
Definitely.
Should we just get into that? Is that a good segue?
We'll touch on it. I like to kind of chronologically go through here.
Yeah.
through your career here. But no, I definitely have that.
Hey, Mark, what grade school did I go to? This interview is over. If you don't know who my third grade art teacher was, you lazy bastard.
I will say I did fanboy a little bit when I realized that your sister's on Survivor, because I remember as soon as I saw her name in the season, I was like, oh, I know exactly who that is. Oh, it's definitely like you guys even look alike. Like it's it's crazy that not that I mean there's been like 500 people that played that game, but it's awesome. Although I will ask this right now. You being the marketing, the marketing savant that you are, did you try to approach your sister and be like, can you wear a BretRaybould.com t-shirt on the show or something? Can you write it out on the paint on your face when you challenge
God. Hilarious missed opportunity, man. Absolutely, I fucked up.
Did you go back? So you go to Wake Forest, and this is where is it right to say that you discovered comedy at Wake Forest through the comedy troupe, or did you discover stand-up as a career prior to that? If this was an option for you.
I was always, my whole life was in love with comedy. Like truly, I grew up in, it's like I said, like the way you could make people, I remember some of like the first big laughs I ever got. I can just remember being on road trips with my family to Nebraska in the car, all 7 of us, big Suburban, and doing an impression of Chris Farley. And I remember being like 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember just like doing because we had his best of DVDs, and my siblings, who are older than me, loved to hear me say like Matt Foley, even though I was like, like, I don't know, so young. And I can, so I always loved comedy, especially like Jim Carrey movies. And I watched so much Conan. And in high school, I think my first attempt at writing funny things was I was in the journalism, the high school newspaper I wrote for, and I had like a column. And I remember the column was the first time I ever tried to like write funny things. And I tell you what, that thing, you should go back and try and find them, because it's just some genius next level stuff. Making fun of the cafeteria food or whatever.
Wait, did you go to school for journalism, or did you go to school to be like?
I thought about it, but I just decided like, I thought about going to J school, but I kind of just decided like, I have a vague interest in business-ish stuff. Wake Forest is probably the best school I got into. They gave me a little bit of a scholarship, not much. Certainly I did have like better ones. And I know my dad was like, fuck. My mom literally said, Brett, you go wherever you want. We will help you. And my dad was like, what about that one you got almost full ride to? And I was, but I chose Wake, and comedy was where I would say I really discovered my true love for comedy, like actually doing it at Wake Forest. They had a college comedy troupe called the Lilting Banshees. And, in addition to giving me some amazing friends in college, friends for life, it was a really special place to begin trying to write comedy, because first off, it's the most pure version of writing comedy. It's just writing funny stuff with friends.
Yeah. It's like a writer's room for a TV show. People just pitching ideas and getting feedback.
It was like a writer's room, and it was like a discipline to it, doing it a few times a week for writing sessions that were like 3 hours long. And my favorites were always when I felt like we were writing just evergreen comedy. That was just like a sketch that could exist for anybody. You didn't have to know President Nathan O. Hatch. Exactly.
Yeah.
And certainly I always hated, and this was like, where my original, I would say both sensibility, taste, and maybe even snootiness came from, but I would always hate and vote against sketches that made fun of like frats and sororities on campus.
Yeah.
Cause I was just like, it's like the Wake Forest hack. Like making whatever Lambda Chi sucks joke or whatever. It's like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah. Now, now why go into stand-up then? Why not pursue sketch like with SNL, Groundlings, Second City? Why did you go stand-up and not into sketch comedy if that's what you were used to?
Yeah, I don't fully I guess it's just stand up. I always truly love stand up too, and I had done it a few times during college, and
Mhm.
I don't know why I was driven to also do stand up. I think I also had discovered Louis during college.
Louis.
And I would consider his stand up and his like perspectives within his stand up is like very influential for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, and to this day, I'm not afraid to crank it in front of some female coworkers. But
It's
no,
always,
but
I think it's funny. It's funny. You can tell somebody's age by what comedian they listen to in college. Like Louis knew exactly what years. Like me, I'm Dane Cook. Like Dane Cook were the college years for me.
oh, really?
Yeah, so you give you a perspective when I
Dude.
was. Tell me, I think do you get nostalgic for that Wake Forest writers room because that is comedy in its purest form. There's no pressure to make it.
Truly,
Doesn't
yeah.
matter big now you feel like you just said, I feel like a relaxancy because now like literally you can get kicked out on your ass if you're not producing content or selling tickets at this point. So do you kind of like long for like that style of comedy or at least a big nest egg so that you can shit around and figure out jokes, at a less urgent rate and to kind of feel them out more. Is that kind of what you would like hopefully reenact later in your life?
I would, yeah, that is certainly the dream, or one of
Mhm.
them is like reenacting and channeling that warmth and fun in a writer's room.
Mhm.
I also think that I mean I joke, but it's true that like the most people I've ever performed comedy for is still college.
Yeah, okay.
Like, because we would 500-ish 550 seater theater,
Mhm.
and I've never performed stand up in front of 550 people. I've done like maybe like 250 or 300,
Mhm.
but never five. So I peaked in
Yeah.
college is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Oh man.
that's an interesting point. It's like but I feel like right now, but your level of comedy has grown exponentially. Well, so but then you leave Wake Forest and you become a monologue intern at Conan, which is incredible. I had Jake Matera on last season of this series, and he was also a monologue intern. So I'm very interested to compare and contrast experiences with his. Like, can you kind of tell me, like, all right, so you're in a sketch comedy group at Wake Forest. Now you're writing monologue jokes, a totally different world that now exists versus what you're used to. Tell me what that experience was like and what you learned from doing that. And I'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so one thing that was cool about being a monologue intern, we actually were not, at least my class was not in
Mhm.
charge of writing the jokes. We were just in
Mhm.
charge of writing the setups.
Mhm.
So we would read all the news,
Mhm.
and then we would write setups that would go to the writers, the monologue joke writers, to make jokes off of. They also could write their own setups, of course,
Mhm.
but so we were like helping distill news stories, and also helping find ones that they wouldn't find. But it
I feel
was
like
like a truly
yeah.
huh?
I was gonna say that sounds. Pardon me, that sounds awful that you are coming up with stuff because I'm sure you're like, here's some incredible punchlines. It's like almost like setting the girl up, and then a guy comes in and says, "Thanks, man. I'm gonna take her home." It's like one of those things. Like, why? Like, could you like what? Like, were you Brett able to also be like, here's some really good punchlines I came up with a setup?
Well, I remember kind of if you had that relationship with a writer, although they weren't really want to use your jokes because I think technically they could technically be legally sued. Granted, that would be a pretty bad fucking faith thing to do as a 19-year-old college student, to be like, you used 10 of my words, you owe me $100,000. Um, but But I remember like telling a joke to a writer and him loving it and putting it, and it made it into the monologue. It was something, and I mean, it was like surreal getting to watch my idol every day. I would watch rehearsal, and I would just be like, "This is so cool." I'm watching the person I watched make comedy the most chew every day on comedy and be so insanely gifted at being funny, and it inspired me.
Tell me how you being a monologue intern where you're writing setups changed how you write comedy even today.
Well, I think it's incredibly useful for comics to even be able to write baseline setup punchline jokes. I think that's like, it's an incredibly good exercise to, because, you know, the best stand-up jokes, it's like, this is a Chris Rock quote, but he's like, every great stand-up bit has a little bit of Henny Youngman to it. The idea being every great stand-up bit, which should, you know, probably sounds very conversational mixed with performative and sounds like natural, like this person is just talking. They're not, but even those bits, they have this like beneath it, they could kind of be distilled to a very classic setup punch structure if they were taken that way. And so I think it's a really useful exercise, and I'm really glad I had that experience of watching the machinations of joke writing. And I think it helped inform me writing more absurdist stuff or thinking more outside the box, because I had, you know, it was a really cool comedy boot camp. And I was also 19 at the time. And I remember I had no friends and I couldn't go out with the other interns because they were like, I couldn't get into bars. So I would like go home and like, I would actually write the punchlines to my setups. And that was like how I spent a lot of my nights. And I remember just walking on the WB lot, and I remember just going like, man, I just really, just being good at classic joke writing is very useful.
What were some of the tips that you learned? Like, can you kind of pull the curtain back and give me some of those tips that you learned through that boot camp?
I mean, I would say it's like, it's the main one is like, I mean, the write every day was very useful, like learning to love writing every day in some form. And I wouldn't say there's like, you know, 10 tips I learned, but I also think, you know, taking comedy, as fun as it is, also as a discipline, is a really useful, like soft lesson. Because I think the best comics love it and we recognize the fun, but you got to take the craft seriously too. If you you know, want to get your stand-up better. And sometimes I certainly fail on that. Like, I don't listen to as many of my sets as I should. And you know, I'm like doing a joke I've done before and not tweaking anything, but I know it's not yet good. Or like, you know, when it's not, you know, it's like not yet done and great. You're like, it's pretty good. It's got something, but it's not yet there. So anyway, I failed at that, but it's good to learn to take it seriously. Kind of.
I would say like the problem I see a lot with setups is like really wordy. Like when I see it coming up there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this person's setup was way too long, and the punchline didn't pay. Like the punchline was not good enough to warrant the minute. So what would they tell you about like mining down a setup? Like, was there anything that sticks out to you as far as like, hey, this is a good example of how to mine something down?
Totally. I mean, that monologue joke writing is the most high octane, like fatless style of joke writing, because it's just, it's not like conversational. It's like literally, what are the only necessary words, and just give me only those. And that aspect of writing jokes is very useful, because, you know, word economy is important. Even if you're a comic who is more conversational, there's still an element of like not wasting words that matters.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing I always run into, is like not knowing which words I can take out. Like I'm looking at what I wrote and I'm like, not sure, like, hey, this needs to be shorter. Is there something that you do on your end, like when you sit down and write, that you're like, okay, I wrote this idea, even maybe something this morning that you wrote or from the day before, like, okay, I wrote this, now I'm going to go in there and punch up the setup. Is there something that you do that you can let me know, that like know about?
I mean, like, I do feel a sense of, I write less than I used to, but um, I do feel like I'm really better at channeling my authentic self and voice more, and keep growing, hopefully growing in that regard than I used to be.
Mhm.
Um, where I actually don't write as much in my notebook. Um, and I do to a degree write on, not even to a degree, I do write on stage. And the reason I like always wanted to do that, but you can't really write on stage at like open mics,
Mhm.
because it's like the reason you can write on stage with audiences is because they're giving you energy.
Mhm.
And whereas like, so, and because you're getting energy, you can feel funny.
Yeah.
And if you can feel funny, you can probably kind of talk in your more natural voice.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen at mics.
Mhm.
So, because it's like, it's not a fun environment. At
Mhm.
least, at least mics in New York. I don't know
Yeah.
if like mics near you might have actual audience, like they're kind of small show, like, or maybe
Mhm.
big shows in some cases, but
Mhm.
for New York, they're not.
Okay.
So uh, I try and like take how I would say a funny joke or story to a friend and put that into how I try and say it on stage.
Okay.
Um,
So you try to reenact on stage like you were talking to a friend, and that's how you write. Because I hear comics talk about this all the time. It's like I write on stage, I write on stage. I don't know what that means. Being someone who doesn't write on stage, I don't know what that entails. Because when I try to like spur the moment, do something on stage, it's a lot of like my brain's the wheels are spinning. I'm like, and then that, and then it starts becoming really wordy because I'm trying to get my thought out. It's not rehearsed. What are something that you would tell me? Like, what's some advice you would tell me? Like, if I want to write on stage, what's something that you would tell me to start
Dude,
doing?
this was like the best advice that's not mine. I would
Mhm.
say like, um, the what helps me is don't even try. If you have like a premise or an idea, don't even try to have it be formulated into a joke. Just honestly say how you felt and what your thoughts are on the thing.
Okay.
And like my brother went and saw Bill Burr a couple months
Mhm.
ago, and Bill Burr obviously being un, out of this world good at stand
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
He noticed Burr is, it feels like he's totally naturally talking and that he's not even trying to tell or have the jokes.
Mhm.
I think that's like and he could tell even when he was working on stuff, he's just truly talking,
Mhm.
and the jokes will probably come from something that you're interested in or makes you feel strongly.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know if that's good advice.
No, that's
Just
great
like, don't
advice.
even like be fearlessly, truly just be fine with talking about it.
Yeah.
And because especially like, dude, you have good stuff in your act.
Mhm.
So like you're emboldened by the fact that you have an act. So, all right. So you talked about this thing for 2 or 3 minutes and weren't really connecting, but
Mhm.
assuming you didn't open on that
Yeah.
and had built up some trust, like gotten a
Mhm.
bit of a leash from the crowd, like, okay, this
Mhm.
guy is funny and has jokes.
Yeah.
Then you can still keep them and then do some shit that might actually work better.
Awesome. That's great advice, man. I appreciate that. Um, cool. So I'm sorry. So can you give me like an example recently of a joke that you have written in which you had to then edit the setup to make it to do your word economy and what you kind of did to it? Do you have an example off the top of your head, or even the joke that you sent me with the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump joke? Do you know, like, because that's just a perfectly well written joke. I can't imagine that came out like that the first time you said it. So, like, what did you find to be like?
Man, that's very nice you say that,
Yeah.
because that joke was during filmed, like I filmed that during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
like that actually kind of was like the first or one of the only, like maybe the first or second or third at most times I had done that
Oh,
bit.
really? It's so
Just
well done.
because,
It's one of my favorite political jokes because that, especially when you talk about Trump and then to a lesser extent Biden, people get tense. I mean, it's getting a little less now that we're a little bit removed from 2020, but it's like it's still like It's, like there's still 10, but you are able to do, we're going to really mine that joke out and we can start doing that now. But I'm just curious to see, like, if you have an example of something like, here's something I wrote, dot, 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 and then I was like, we didn't need this, and I cut this out, just to give me like an actual real life example of how you edit a setup.
Yeah, I love to think about, like, because I'm thinking about the current, like some of the newer stuff I am working on, and it's cool to, like, I mean, it's certainly cool to have stayed with the bit for many months and go like, wow, now this is like actually like high octane stand up, has a lot of punchlines in it, whereas before it was one laugh. And I just stayed with it and kept telling it and got a line here. But I can't think of anything off top where I'm like, I have this joke about just jokes where I'm like, I did not need any of that other talking. I think some of it comes from like the longer you do stand up, you're like, I didn't need any of that talking. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is I have a story about Big Gay Ice Cream, which is an ice cream store in New York.
Yeah.
I might have done that bit on your show.
Yeah, I think you may. Yeah, the one in Hershey. Yeah.
And the way I've told that bit before, there's just so much pointless talking about the store, like New York and the ice cream store. And all you need is conservative father coming to New York. We wanted ice cream, Big Gay Ice Cream. Was the only place nearby to know, like, okay, I kind of know what the bit's going to be about. But,
well, let's talk about the joke that you sent me, which is the Joe Biden Donald Trump joke. Let's just start getting into that, because like I said, when I booked you, when I originally reached out to you a few months ago looking for the show, I was like, this is the joke I want to talk about because of all the jokes out there that are political. This is my favorite because I saw him do this joke in which Bret just openly states he's liberal in a crowd where liberals were the minority, and they love the joke, especially how touchy when you talk about Trump or Biden people can get. That joke killed in a room with people who probably mostly vote for Donald Trump. So what was the genesis of that joke? Did you write that joke because you were like, I want to write a political joke about Donald Trump? Or did something spark in your head and then that was like, oh, this is a joke? Or was another reason I'm not even thinking of?
No, I think honestly, man, I think that joke kind of largely germinated from just the emotional truth of what it felt like to vote for Joe Biden. And I even, like, from my personal life, like I was going through a breakup at the time where a big component of our breakup was from the fact that my parents are conservative and vote conservative. And my ex-girlfriend was liberal, very liberal. And the type of liberal in which you excommunicate and believe conservatives are just evil or worse.
Oh, wow.
And so I was very frustrated with so my approach to politics is certainly to be able to talk about it in a way that doesn't feel political. You can talk about politics to not be like, okay, this guy's, it's like the angle should just be the bit, and not the angle shouldn't be I'm trying to do anything with my beliefs. At the same time, I think when you do stand up, I mean, audiences, it's better to be authentic, even if it's a little more challenging, because audiences can tell if you're trying to put on something for them. And I'm, for lack of a better term, I mean, I don't like to prescribe by conservative liberal because I think they're limiting terms, and maybe that's an annoying thing to say. Like, I don't like labels, but I don't know why I said that like Trump. I don't like labels. but I probably do skew more leftist on beliefs. So you got to be genuine in a conservative room. And I think if it's a great joke and it's honest, then people will still like it. And that was a joke, especially that time doing it, where you really had to do a lot of setup, just like some brief setup on like the perspective on don't be the type of person who doesn't like someone based off their political beliefs.
Yeah. And you
And
say
I think
that.
audiences,
Yeah.
I think I say it
You
because
say
I
it
think,
directly. Yeah. Yeah. You say you
and I
shouldn't
think I
hate someone.
needed to at the time. Like, I think that was, maybe now you're like you said, I think it is chiller, but certainly at the time I felt like that needed to be said to just like almost make it feel like you can relax.
Yeah.
And if you're not relaxed, it's on you because, and I think that helped, like, and I did that bit. I did the one that's online, like that's in a conservative room in like rural, I think, Virginia.
Okay.
And I do that bit my philosophy on stand-up is do your bits everywhere. Like, meaning don't like, you can form fit a little bit for the show, of course, but don't change like who you are or fundamentally what the joke is because of a room.
Yeah.
I have gay jokes that I do an LGBTQ show because I think that it's like, to kind of like disrespectful not to, in a way, because it's like, why would, if it's a good joke and it's like clearly well-meaning and well said and not dickish, then it'll get a laugh. Like,
it's like the person sitting like an all black room saying, "I don't see color." Yeah. Yeah. It's like, of course.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So but I think what makes it a great bit, and then thus you a great comic, is you compare it to voting for Joe Biden is like driving a car with the check engine light on. I think what elevates you as a comic and why I have such a respect for what you do and the jokes you tell is there is no other analogy that can be made that's better than that analogy. No other comic that is a joke about voting for Biden is going to make an analogy better than driving a car, because everyone's on board. You channel in conservatives because, yes, of course, that's the reason people vote for Biden, because he's not Trump. And people who are liberal vote for Biden because it wasn't Trump. So like everybody's on board with that analogy. How did you get to that analogy? Don't tell me it was the first one you came up with. Tell me you had some other crackpot analogy that didn't work, and then tell me how you mined it to get to the check engine light.
I truly, and it sounds annoying maybe, but I think that was my first analogy.
Wow.
Just because it was like it's this weird mix of like, Biden was clearly and is clearly not as fully there.
Yeah.
The dude's 80. The dude's 80 years old. That's crazy. We would not let our grandparents drive at 80. Like, it's like, why? I can't believe we don't have age maximums. I cannot believe this is like a side combo. Like, isn't that absurd?
You have an age minimum. You got to be at, I think, 35 to be president.
35.
Yeah.
So it should be 35 to 64. But once you're going to retire, you don't get to fucking be president. You need to be in the prime of your life.
Yeah.
But no, I think that was the first
check engine light. What did you do? Give me all the Bret Raybould mind gelling that came up with check engine light.
I think it just is something that I've had in my car just now is a constant check engine light. And sometimes when you have it and you don't have all the money, you're like, it'll be fine. Like, you just override the check engine light, like, yeah, you're bluffing. I think the analogy is apt because Biden is a car with the check engine lights flashing. Like, it's like clearly there are signs that this car's not driving as smooth, but because Trump was the alternative for some people, it was just like pretending there was no check engine light on in the first place.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go ahead.
No, but it was like, I think it made me feel more, not that I'm ever like landed, but it was an aspect of a bit like that made me feel good about myself as a stand-up in terms of like, wow, it was a great bit and I didn't have all of that written. And it stemmed from it wasn't like I did 200 mics and then got it there. It was like I channeled kind of more my authentic voice and had a good bit out of the gate. And, I don't know how like fully relevant it is anymore. So that's why I was just like, oh, I'll just throw that clip out there because it was during a time period where it's way more relevant.
Oh, I think it's amazing. I think it's an amazing joke. Now, were you saying where you're like voting for Biden is like going on a diet? Voting for Biden, were you playing with other things in your head? Or
No,
was it always,
it was
okay.
And
Okay.
I think it was like it was a lot of pent up, like hadn't been on stage in a while. So new ideas you try, maybe the new ideas you're trying are stronger.
Yeah.
Because you may have a lot of new ideas.
Yeah.
Although, writing during stand up during the pandemic was tough because we weren't accruing as much life experience in a way. Like, like you're just watching TV and kind of walking around. Like, I don't know. It's just not as much life.
It's interesting you say that because I would say, again, it's like a whole new phase of Bret Raybould comedy. Because when I watched your special, which is a great special, I would say, yeah, Bret is a storytelling joke. He has long form stories that are hilarious that he takes on tangents and then like sometimes there's callbacks at the end to a story he had told at the beginning. But now you're more into like because of the not having those experiences, now you're drawing on more like I guess like I don't know what traditional style stand-up jokes or more like set up punch kind of jokes. I don't know exactly what I would call that, but would you say that's accurate and fair because they took away your life pretty much for 2 years?
I would say I am working a little more in New York and less on the road, which some of the format of that is quicker sets.
Okay.
And it was something that I'm happy to work on, which is in a weird way, dude. I sometimes this sounds maybe douchey or I don't know what it is, but I actually find it easier to do an hour than 8 minutes. I can like I don't know. I've done an hour a ton but 8 minutes is hard because you don't have that much time to introduce yourself to them and sometimes like stuff you can get into in an hour. There are things you can get into either comedically deeper or just like a little bit like you can just like take, for example, like shitting in the potty training story. That is a story. It's like a 6 minute story. It's really hard to make it work in like a 8 or 10 minute set just because like people need to just like start getting to know you and loosen it up a little. And then you can tell this like kind of stupid, silly thing. But like that bit wouldn't like I could never open on that. And then it's an 8 minute story, 6 minute story. So what, I'm going to have that be my whole set?
Yeah, which is incredible because I think like most comics struggle with trying to make their bits longer. You're struggling with making them shorter because you do have, I mean, that the potty bit is, I mean, I would say like if there's a joke that you can hang your hat on or a joke that you're remembered for, it's the potty joke. I think my favorite joke, well, besides the potty joke, is the cop joke. I think that, and that's even a longer joke where it's just like there's so much funny packed into this story, and then even a callback to a previous joke or whatever. But when you're writing comedy and you're writing these jokes, tell me how you do that. Either you can talk about the Biden joke because it sounded like that kind of happened and you know kismet or whatever, it just all came together. But like when you're writing a longer joke like the potty bit or the cop bit, tell me how you write something like that because you can get into the trap of being really wordy in a story joke.
And that I think it comes from like being very exhaustive with your approach. Like you want these stories to be hyper punchy. That's like the goal is combining hopefully some of the wallop of there can be a more rewarding ending if you have some more setup, but along the way to that bigger, punchier, wallop of an ending, you got to have a lot of punches too. And I think being able to do longer sets really helps you not be afraid to stretch out, but like keep in mind, like we got to keep being hopefully funny and interesting. And I always feel like the real toil of stand-up is it's not, I kind of feel like it's not writing kind of funny stuff. I don't think writing kind of funny stuff's that hard.
Mhm.
I think the work of stand-up is staying with a bit and keep working at it and squeezing as many laughs out of it as you can.
Mhm.
Um, and that potty training story is like, oh wow, like by the end of all of those kind of like years working on it,
Mhm.
there's a ton of laugh lines.
Yeah.
And I think that's the toil of stand-up, is trying to take not just writing something pretty good, but taking pretty good, staying with it till hopefully you get it to, a great, like, wow, really great level.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, are you writing a joke like that more often, or are you working that on stage? Because you said I work jokes out on stage because it gives my authentic voice. I can tell you my response to something like an opinion or an issue. But when it's a story, it doesn't really your opinion on it doesn't matter. It's a story. So are you writing
yeah.
that down more? Or are you still working that on stage?
Yes. That was that was an era where I was writing more. And if you ever improvised a funny line, it was like, okay, keep that.
Yeah.
Like, I need to make sure I say that again because that was good to get a big laugh here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like largely written.
Yeah.
And a lot of like trial and error of like, all right, I wrote that. Well, that angle or take or joke bombed. So toss, see if this
Yeah.
one will. Oh, that got a good laugh. Okay, that
Mm-hmm.
stays. People are always like, is it hard to memorize material? I'm like, I don't know if you should ever like memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never hard to memorize something that gets a great laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Or to like remember the idea. If it's
Yeah.
something that when you tell it, it frequently does well,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, some reason it flows from me naturally.
Yeah.
But if it's something that's not doing well, it is more memory centric.
But how do you write punchlines for that potty joke? Because the joke could have, I mean, it's a funny story. Like, yeah, Brett shit in a toilet, and then if shit is like his nephew's toilet. But like to get that where it's a bit, because that, I mean, you could tell that story at a bar, and it wouldn't be as funny as the way you tell it in a stand-up act. Because there's a difference
For
between
sure.
telling a story at a bar versus telling it on stage to a captive audience. So tell me how you write a joke like that, so it's not. Because you say like, hey, I try to have a conversation on stage with a friend, but you can't really, because then it's a different
And
aura
that
of a music.
relates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that relates to what we're talking about, like making your bits high octane.
Yeah.
Like stand up, that's like a high octane. Like I've
Mhm.
worked at the story
Yeah.
to get it where I know all the beats and I know
Mhm.
there are laughs here.
Yeah.
So I don't have to so it's not like the way you would tell with a friend is like, yeah,
Mhm.
you could be way looser but
Mhm.
this isn't a bunch of people looking at you. So that one was just like it's just like a lot of trial and error on like trying new tags. And because
Mhm.
as you can guess, that story is very much, there's a lot of it that's fabricated for the sake of comedy.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
the bones of it are true, but
Mhm.
you have artistic license to make the story more narratively interesting than
Yeah.
I took a shit in my brother's toilet. He thought it was mine.
Yeah.
His son thought it was crazy. Hey, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
just, so I don't know. But that's what I'm talking about. That
Yeah.
stand up is the act of when I first told that story, which it became a
Mhm.
6-minute bit.
Mhm.
The first time I told it, it was probably just, I took a shit in a potty training toilet and I went up to my brother, and later in the day, he goes, dude, you're never going to believe how big of a shit my son took. Like, okay, there's one laugh. And then
Yeah.
what else happened, or what else, like, what did transpire, and how do I mix the truth of what transpired with the, truth of finding fun, like just like
Mhm.
the like willingness to take artistic leaps
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
entertainment's
Sending it to your
sake.
father. Yeah. Sending the picture to your father. But
Right.
how do you come up with that stuff? How do you know not to end the bit right after the reveal to your brother that it was your shit, not your nephew's shit? how do you know to keep going where you're bringing in your father and now your sister-in-law is
But
now included? Like, how do you start working that out? Like, what are you
that,
doing? Are you
yeah,
mapping it out like on a piece of paper, like trying to bring in characters, or what are you doing?
I think that's what's great about stand up is like you can see if it's the end of a bit
Mm-hmm,
and then people tell you it's not because
mm-hmm,
audiences proofread, right?
mm-hmm.
They're there to like their laughs confirm that
Mm-hmm.
you have something. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about stand up is
Mm-hmm.
unlike other artistic pursuits which are how do you fucking know if something's good?
Yeah.
You have a little bit more of an idea with stand up because you're like, well, I've done the idea a ton for audiences and it typically gets a great response or good response. So
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who, not all these crowds are fucking idiots.
Yeah. So would you say if you're telling a bit on stage that's relatively in its infancy and it's just hitting, you don't stop. You're like, all right, it's hitting. I got to expand on it. Is that something you do?
My
Okay.
first thought is, how can I make this more? And I
Okay.
sometimes that one can come more naturally, but I've
Mm-hmm.
had bits that I'm like, man, I want to do more with this, but I
Mm-hmm.
struggle at finding the more. I struggle at building on the idea. I mean,
But
even one right now, you
yeah.
want me to share an example?
Yeah. Oh yeah, please. That would be awesome.
And I remember you had a great bit on serial killers. And so I had a joke on serial killers that I didn't do at your show because I was like, I think Mark already had a great joke about them and it would feel like repetitive to even just as the topic. It's like we love serial killers,
Mhm.
but you know who we hate? Mass murderers.
Yeah.
And the joke is like they both kill a lot of people. The difference is if you do it all at once, we're like, go to hell. But if you space it out, we're like, who's this fella? Like, who's this quirky son of a gun? So that's like the joke. That's like I've tried so hard to build on that dude.
Yeah.
I can't. I've tried angles on like, I guess it might just be repetitive, but like 20 deaths in an afternoon,
Yeah.
tragedy. 20 deaths over 2 decades, Netflix series.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've tried like and I've tried that and it gets like a chuckle, but
Yeah.
it's almost like this like after chuckle that
Yeah.
it's like a lesser laugh than the initial punchline. So I'm like,
Yeah.
why say that?
Yeah.
Because then I can't think of anything. And then I'm like, should I just try and think of another serial killer joke or
Yeah.
observation? And
Yeah.
it's kind of been frustrating because I want to have more than just that one joke about serial killers, but I can't really
Yeah.
think of it.
Well, that's a great. I'm thinking when you're saying that it's a comic's job, and so I'm going to relate the political joke, and I'm going to relate your serial killer joke. A comic's job is to articulate something like something divisive or something
Dark or weird.
controversial, yeah, something like that, where and articulate it funny that everybody understands it right away. Which is why when you say Biden's like voting for Biden's like trying to check engine, like everyone immediately relates to it right away. You know what I mean? The pressure is off because everyone's laughing. If you say I vote for Biden because Trump's a piece of shit, everyone's gonna be like, well, now the moon, the room's a lot tenser, but your job was to alleviate the tension. With the serial killer bit, the comic's job is to I'm trying to make a point that's intellectual what you're doing, but there's like this fine line between I don't need the audience to think about it too much. It has to be when I say it, it has to be like that's why when you talk about Louis being so good, when he talks about you saw his most recent special, the Sorry, Easy Sorry, they just came out with.
Dude, I saw it, dude. It makes it watching it made me go like, this is why I love stand-up.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like when he makes the point about pedophiles and he's like sex dolls, children's sex dolls, like immediately right away, everybody knows what he's talking about, and it's funny. Where it's like, but like you don't. If he came up with something where you had to think about it a little too much, then the joke stops. It's like, how do you keep the audience from thinking about it? It has to be like right on the, right in their face.
It's got to be like right there, but they can't see it. Like,
correct.
You have to have done the setup where it's like it's so when a great joke will like it's like kind of like a great movie in that like
Mm-hmm.
a great movie is like I did not see that coming, and yet it made perfect sense.
Yeah, that's why
Right?
everybody
Like,
jerks off the Sixth Sense, is because the entire time the clues were there that Bruce Willis was dead, but like it wasn't like they had to explain it at the end. Like it was in your face, like you could see it, but you needed the ending to tell you that. Yeah,
yeah, in a more microcosmic way, I think jokes are like a degree of that, where like the breadcrumbs are all there, so that when the punchline gets delivered, you're surprised, but you're not. You know how they got there.
yeah,
Like the audience's brain needs to be able to make the leap,
yes,
whatever the leap is. If the leap is too great,
mm-hmm.
then it'll bomb, and if the leap is too short, too small, then it'll bomb because they're like, yeah, we thought of that. You know what I mean? They're like, you didn't surprise me with something I didn't think of, but I can get.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but and I can see where like when you say like I struggle with that, like obviously like I understand what you're saying, but you struggle, but then you also achieve it because when I'm watching Bret Raybould retire from comedy, I'm understanding your joke. So whatever it was during that process, I went there with you. When the when you talk, when the cops at the car and that's when you're a comic, and then later he's like reciting a joke, and I'm following the story with you. So like you're obviously making these leaps more narrow for me to understand, because I was not there with you. I was not there when you got pulled over. I was in the convenience store when the cops showed up. But you're doing a good enough job to give me the visual in a way that's not like boring or whatever. So tell me how you kind of do that. How do you keep the audience engaged through a joke like that?
I mean, I think and it's something I want to get better on, is like funny description, I think, is a big thing. I think comics have a lot of weapons at our disposal. And sometimes I think New York comics, stand-up it's a spoken medium. So you can dip into so many different ways of being hopefully, compelling or interesting. The jokes themselves, straight up, the written material. There's also tone of voice, cadence. I would say if you're doing a different voice, like just straight up doing a character. And hopefully when you're telling a story, you're combining all these different like instruments at your disposal. You're pacing, how saying a bunch of things really quickly and then going deliberately slow for others. Like there's so like each of them are different instruments. And I think a great stand-up bit or story, especially like a story, is going to try and do a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what you watch Louis. It's like, this guy is a fucking symphony of how good he is at every instrument that at his disposal as a comedian he does. So I think that the cop bit, I hope I have, a good mix of changing the pacing and doing some voices. I mean, if it calls for it, don't just throw in a funny voice if
doesn't warrant it.
It'd be weird if
yeah
you're I don't know. The bank teller was like, "Thank you, come again," and he wasn't even Indian. He was just a white guy, and you just did a rude attempt at a funny voice, and it was an Indian voice, a stereotypical one, but you're like, "No, but it's funny voice." It's like, yeah, but it made no fucking sense, you idiot.
Oh man, that's funny. I've gosh, we're already at 10 o'clock, and oh my gosh, we're gonna have a part 2 or something like that, because we haven't talked about the business side of everything. I do want to ask you, when you said like, "Hey, I'm really trying to find my authentic voice." I hear this all. This is the most cliche term in comedy. Is like, you need to find your voice. You need to find your voice. What the fuck does that mean? Finding your voice? Because when you're on stage, Brett, if like, how is that? I mean, unless you're playing a character or unless you're just doing material that you're adamantly against for cheap laughs, like, what does that mean? Like, Brett, what is your voice? Tell me.
Man, I don't know, but I think like my voice, it's not like I'm like, well, I am the enraged intellectual. Like, no, I think your voice just means being able to channel the emotional truth of the joke and like being just more authentic about how you feel about things. And I'm really proud of my hour special. I think it's very good. I really do.
Yeah.
But I also think, thank you, man. But I also think like I can be more authentic. I can lie less for the sake of a bit than I did in that special. Not that there's not going to be allowances we take, and because of course, but I just think it's like, can I give this audience a better idea of like how I feel about shit, not just here's some funny stuff, because I think it's best when an audience feels like they like, not only do they hopefully like your bits, but also like know kind of what you're about. And I think that's like what you're swimming toward with voice. And I think every bit is a degree of like it's not like you go like, what is the Bret Raybould take on street lamps or whatever? Like that would be crazy. I just think it's like the way you would. I still feel like I can be better, but I think I am better than I used to be at. Sometimes I feel like I say a lot of funny or slightly interesting things to friends in conversation. And I would find myself never putting that in my act. And why not? Like, why not that this person, when I think at the times I am saying something, more interesting to a friend, why not have those thoughts and trying to find a space for those in your act while also not being like, well, also going, but I need the fucking jokes. At the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Would you say that the lying is like a crutch that comics use? Because are you saying like the reason I don't tell jokes that I talk to my friends with is because I'm afraid people won't get me, and then I'm super vulnerable on stage?
Yes, I'm afraid this idea, which might be slightly headier or just not as direct and simple. Audiences won't get it and they won't like it, so why even try it? And getting over that fear and going, well, you know what, it's kind of who I am and what I think, so I'm gonna stay with this idea at least for longer. Of course, if you've tried a lot and boy, you're got nothing, don't be the type of idiot comedian who's like, but like it's me. I'm like, and in that case, it'd be like, but where are the jokes?
Exactly.
So I don't know.
So your dream would be, in addition to doing your comedy troupe in Wake Forest, would be that if I
two
were
chicks at the same time. Go on.
If I were to ask the audience after one of your shows, tell me who is Bret Raybould, that they would be like, that it would be damn close to who you actually are. That they would be like, he's a guy who's just passionate, he's kind of goofy, but he means well, like you would.
I would hope. And I'm sure some audiences,
especially like he's a big lib who really cares about, you want to like
he's a snowflake libtard who and I would go, I'm not a libtard, I'm just a retard.
Now I want to talk about Bret Raybould retires from comedy for a little bit, because I knew you when you showed up to Pedro's thing and he was like, this is Bret Raybould. I was like, wait a minute, I know this name. I know who he looks when I know his name, and I forget, it might have been Pedro that shared your special on Facebook saying like, hey, check out my buddy, this is awesome. And I was like, you allude to this, which is like, it's on YouTube, so I'm more inclined to watch it because it's free versus going and paying Amazon Prime the $4.29 or whatever to watch a special on, so like, tell me why you thought, I think you were like 10 years into comedy when you came out with it.
Yeah, maybe like 7, 6.5, 7. Yeah.
6.5, 7. What made you feel that like, I need to film a special? Because you didn't even tell the audience it was special. Everyone was unaware besides all the movers and shakers behind the scenes or whatever. Everyone else had no idea that it was being filmed. So tell me why not let the audience know, and then why do it?
Why not let the audience know is I wanted to feel like I earned every laugh in the most true way that night.
Okay.
And I didn't want any amount of the audience participating in making it a better show.
Oh, okay.
My hope was to make it truly as good as I could and earn the laughs and not be like, but give me a little more juice, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that was why I went there. I also thought it would be, I only did one show, like for the taping. I only taped one, and it's a higher stakes position because you're like, if I don't catch it tonight, or maybe it's just not a hot crowd and they're not into me, like fuck. Imagine spending like $1,800 on renting cameras to just film myself bombing for an hour.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I also wanted to be one show because I wanted to be a bigger one. I wanted the laughs to sound bigger on the album. But I could sell. I was surprised I sold the venue out because I'm not a drawer name. But I figured if I did one, I could pack one out rather than filming two and having like 40 or 50 at each. Maybe it's better to have one. And I think I had 140. But why did I film it? I felt like I had worked on that hour of material for several years on the road, and I didn't want to wait on opportunities. And I thought I had a good hour to do, and I had a unique comedy concept, which is the retire from comedy. And, I retired from comedy briefly.
Unique concept or marketing tool? Which one?
I will tell you what, the concept came from the comedy concept. I had recorded this Bret Raybould album, and I had already had it. Like my brother, that stemmed from my brother and I just like singing Bublé in the car and just laughing. Yeah. And then I was like, I think it'd be really funny to tell people I was retiring from comedy, and then that I was going to pursue a career in jazz. Yeah. And then release a jazz album called Bret Raybould. Just as far as like, I just thought that would be funny. Yeah. And it just turns out the Bret Raybould retires from comedy is like, oh wow. Really? Yeah. Like I could get people who didn't give a fuck about me, because why would they, to come to the show?
Young guy too. You're also not 60 years old. Like you see this 20 something,
right.
What the hell's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Why is he giving in? And I think it did absolutely help me on the marketing, because even people who didn't know me or care were like, I don't know this guy, but I'll see anyone's final show.
I need to ask. This was not a question I was going to ask you, but you were talking about initially, like when you're talking about sending voice, and you're like, even on my special, I wish I was, more authentic. Did you feel pressure to come out and do a special? This whole thing back to pressure, like the Mr. and Mrs. Raybould pressuring from when you were a kid. Did you feel pressure to come out with something like, hey, my sister just got done filming Survivor. She's a name now. Like, did I, like my brother is, a freaking the go-to legal guy for a senator. I'm not sure which senator, but like, I mean, it could be a senator who desperately needs it. But was this your way of being like, hey, I'm doing stuff too. I'm putting output out there too. Like their names are popping up everywhere. Now Bret Raybould's name starts popping up everywhere. Was that an inkling?
It wasn't. It was truly like, I felt like, you know what, I think I'm ready. And I think I was ready. And it's the mix of like, you're ready and you're not ready. Like, like you're as ready as you'll ever be, and you can always justify not being ready because I could make the material maybe even a little bit better if I spent more time on it. But also part of the fun of making stuff is like, well, that's what it was that night, and that's what it is. Okay. So there wasn't any like pressure on like, oh yeah, my sister. By the way, my sister being on Survivor, she made it to the final 5.
I know.
And I know. Yeah. And you know what's funny, Mark? It's funny because she made it that far. She made it past family visits where a family member comes to the island.
Yeah. Your mom came, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so there's like a long running joke in our family that both my mom and sister got a TV credit before me, and they weren't even trying.
But no, I have to ask this too. I watched a special again for the third time. Preparation for this show. There are advertisements like crazy. It's 60,000 views. How much money are you making on it? Give everyone a reference point for a special that hit 60,000 views, how much money has Bret Raybould made from this special for YouTube?
Sure. So the most money, and this maybe just helps people think comedy, but the money I got, I actually turned down a couple scant offers I got from some streaming platforms.
Oh, nice.
Because the money wasn't that good, and they're not like big platform. It wasn't like Netflix, but they're, or like with a comedy distributor, I was like, there's no. It's better for me to own it. So from YouTube, I've gotten pretty much like no revenue.
Oh, really? You know, they advertise. I mean, there's like advertisements galore on your special.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. There's so much advertisements on your special. Finally, skip ad. Yeah.
I got to figure out how to turn that off. You know what? I don't even think I get the money from it because I use a song in the credits of an artist I love. And I think he gets the money from it.
Oh,
and but I've made money from TikTok from the clips.
Okay.
Around like 1,500 from that, and the album playing on Sirius XM can net a comedian, a decent chunk of change. Nothing insane. I don't know if I should say on air, but.
People talk about that.
Sure.
That Sirius is where you want to go. So tell me, what are we looking at?
Totally.
Yeah.
So like for me personally, I get anywhere from like 5 to the most I've gotten is like 1,800 in a month.
Nice.
From music, the 1,800 I think was the first month where Sirius played it, a few times in a row.
That's awesome. Good for you, man.
Which was great. So. Any comic out there, it's like, it's very useful to have your album. It felt good because it also made me feel like a sense of credibility as far as I'm not just a guy who's done stand up. I'm like, here's something I actually made. And there's just something you can actually point to.
Well, I mean, I hope you are proud of the special. It's an A+ special. I mean, it was better than 70% of the shit that came out on Netflix that year. So
thank you. I would say 85.
Now tell me, how did you get on Sirius?
That was a very distinct percentage.
Yeah, I know, like 81%. Now, how did you get on Sirius? You don't have an agent. Did you submit it on your own right, or how did you even get it on the Sirius? Did you know somebody?
The label, the comedy album. The album was on a label. The label's called You Lucky Dog Productions.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So there, my label helped. They can't get it on Sirius. They can just
apply.
Apply. Like I'm sure anyone can send a cold email, but like everything, if it comes from a trusted source, they're more likely to give it an ear. Okay. And they gave it an ear and liked it, and play it, and they should play it more because in fact, if anyone's listening. Go to SiriusXM Comedy, just email them, hey, can we get more Bret Raybould?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they love it because they're longer bits. I'm sure they're longer bits. I'm sure it's more appealing to them to have it on there as well. Versus like
in some ways.
Because think about they pay you $500 for a 9-minute bit. Think about the $500 they got to pay for a 2-minute bit. How many artists.
That's exactly right. I think they pay per play.
Yeah.
So in a way, if it's like a good 6-minute bit, they're like, hey, that's cheaper for us than 3 2-minute bits.
Exactly. Okay.
I and a friend co-wrote a movie, came up briefly, Race the movie. And it's a slapstick spoof movie of all of the Oscar bait race movies. So what Scary Movie was to horror, this is to white savior / prestige race movies. Okay. It makes fun of Green Book, Hidden Figures, The Help, Black Panther, Get Out, 12 Years a Slave, and Django, among others. Yeah. Its original title was Not Another Slave Movie. So my co-writer is not a honky like myself.
Yeah, I actually really like the other one, the other title of Another Slave Movie. The way you pitched it on our podcast was it was like the blazing saddles of the 2020. And I think that's more of the Scary Movie, like the kind of like the spoofing of things. Or is it a mix?
I truly, I think it's like a mix. I mean, I
Okay.
think one of the contest we won with it had, a compliment that meant a lot to me, and it made me feel like it was seen and understood.
Mhm.
And they called it Mel Brooks for the modern era,
Okay.
and that was what we're really wanting to do is bring back slapstick, a
Mhm.
form of comedy we do not see in movies anymore for some
Mhm.
reason. And I think doing slapstick about a subject that people don't think you can be funny about is something that would really resonate with people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of artistic risk aversion. And
Mhm.
I don't think great art comes from averting risk. I think great art comes from going into risky territories and hopefully being good enough that you came out with gold.
Yeah.
But there's still an admiration for just going into the risky territory. Of course, with well-meaning, creative thought and like intellectual curiosity, not just being like, I'm
Mhm.
going to be risky. Let me just be a dick and say some offensive shit and it's risky.
Yeah.
No, but if you go into risky thought, like, I think you can have maybe the laughs can be bigger or
Yeah.
deeper. Um, and we yeah, you mentioned Blazing Saddles, and
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite comedies of all time. And
Yes.
I all the time, here's our frustration.
Mhm.
Everyone says you cannot make Blazing Saddles these days.
Mhm.
Then one breath later, they will say, but also it's like one of the best comedies of all time. So you go, why can't you? Why not? Why
Mhm.
are we letting a fear of certain words existing in art
Mhm.
uh, not exist, even though we know that the art is effectively using them? And the
Mhm.
art is, though it's a silly comedy, it's still
Mhm.
reflecting a very real aspect of America,
Yeah.
which is its problems with racism.
Race. Exactly.
And it's not like racism is funny
Yeah.
because it's not in life, but you
It's
can
the denying
filter.
of racism. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The denying of racism can be
Yeah.
funny, and filtering like racism, which is just stupidity. That's what
Mhm.
racism is. It's a form of stupidity,
Mhm.
which stupidity is funny. So
Mhm.
when you can laugh at, I think you can laugh at racist characters,
Yeah.
and if hopefully
Yeah.
managed well. And I think my friend Chris and I did manage it well. And the thing I wanted to share with you,
Yeah. Share.
because
Please share the update.
the update is, and I hope if anyone's listening, I hope they check it out. I don't know when this will come out, but
Mhm.
we spent a year trying to get it made into a movie and sending it to
Mhm.
all a bunch of, producers and agents and all of
Mhm.
that. And after a year of getting really positive feedback, but kind of an unwillingness to move forward with the
Mhm.
project because of A, our lack of name, and B, a fear of how people would perceive just doing a
Yeah.
comedy about
Yeah.
this,
Kind of to
regardless
your
of how
point.
it was done.
Yeah. Kind of your point. They find it funny, but because it's about race, even the studios are like, ah, but like,
Which and that's
yeah.
and that's where I go. The fact that you find it funny is
Yeah.
proof that it works,
Mhm.
because it would not like it would
Mhm.
not if you didn't find it funny, that would be proof that the comedy,
Mhm.
like, that it doesn't work, that maybe there is something that feels
Yeah.
off,
Yeah.
or a joke that, oh, that is like a joke you got to think about.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's about perfect and no one could be offended at anything, because who knows, but the point is we have showed it to a lot of friends and who are like woke,
Yeah.
and they're like, even for them it's above board. So my update is, after a year of that, we've decided, what are we doing? We want to make this. How can we make it? We'll do it as a play. So we
Ah.
decided, we adapted it into a play called Race the Movie, the Play. And
Race the movie to play.
yeah, we're moving forward with it. We had a read through last week.
Nice.
We're going to be launching a Kickstarter within the next couple, depending on when this comes out.
This will come
Um,
out probably in April and May, so please share the Kickstarter link with me. I will definitely include it in the
okay,
show notes.
cool. Our Kickstarter, I think we're going to do early March,
Okay.
but don't sweat. Whenever this comes out, if you're listening, just go lend a follow
Yeah.
and check the
Well,
project out. And if you're in New York, come to the
yeah,
show because we're literally going to do it.
that's awesome. And well, let
Um,
me ask you this then, because Bret Raybould is a comic who bets on himself. He came out with that special. Why not release this on YouTube? Again, I'm ignorant to how much it costs to make a movie, but why not put
Same.
yourself in said debt that you did not incur in college via your father? Put yourself in the red and make this movie and bet on yourself that you're going to make this back tenfold.
We are.
Okay.
And the thing is, the play is the first form of doing that just
Okay.
because plays are way more affordable.
Okay.
And I also think the fun of doing it in the live comedic format will
Mhm.
be unmistakably what it should be. Doing it as a play is more DIY. It
Mhm.
costs way less. Plus, as a play, we don't need locations because it'll just be, a black stage. Like, that's
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
People understand, like, and what's great about a stage play is the costumes and props can be cheap, and who gives a damn?
Yeah.
No one's coming to look at realistic tunics.
Exactly.
People are coming for the jokes. So if you have a cardboard hat, who could give a shit?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw
Um,
Phantom of the Opera. I can't tell you what the costumes look like, but I can tell you how awesome the music sounded. So yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And that's true. That's what you take
Yeah.
home with you.
Mhm.
And for a comedy play, it's the jokes. That's what it's all
Yeah.
about. So
Yeah.
plus doing it as a play, I don't know, it just feels like we're in control. Like we can, why wait on a gatekeeper to give us permission to make something we already know and believe is great?
Awesome.
Just go do it ourselves. What's great is we'll be able to like attach, the joy of making art is making art.
Yeah.
So why not do that? The joy of making art isn't trying to get art made, it's just
Mhm.
making it.
Yeah.
And now that we've made that decision of taking the steps to see it through,
Mhm.
it really, I feel a real sense of excitement and purpose about it. And it'll be great because, I get to be one of the leads. And,
That's awesome.
the reality is why am I one of the leads? Because I co-wrote the fucking thing. No one would let me be. I don't know shit about, I don't know fuck about acting, but I know the character and I think I can do a good job with him. And anyway, so it's
Awesome.
just like, it'll just be a really, no matter what happens with it, I really hope and believe it could really grab people's attention and resonate with a huge audience if some of the marketing is there. But no
Mhm.
matter what, I know I'll look back and be so happy I made it, even if 3
Yeah.
people come to the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You don't want to be lured into the ground regretting never have done the movie for the public. So yeah. No, totally agree.
Yeah, I
I'll support
totally
it.
want everyone.
Yeah.
Huh?
I'll
We
support it.
we do plan
Yeah.
on. Please do, man. We do plan on launching the Kickstarter with different, tiers.
Nice.
One of them being like a certain amount. You can get an MP4 of the show. Like we are going to record it.
Yeah.
And there'll be tons of things. So
Nice.
please do, man. Put your child's college fund on it. If you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's $300. Tell me, like, Brett, the marketer, all these ideas you come up with, Brett Coin novel, Brett Coin, Brett, Bitcoin for comic novel idea. Come up with Cumrag, send them to Tom Segura novel idea, naming your special retiring from comedy, which is a marketing tool, whether you really realize that or not. Coming up with these different avenues in which you are promoting yourself in ways that other comics are not. Is that on purpose? Are you waking up at 3 a.m. going, this is a good idea? Or are you like constantly like watching because market news or something like that to see like what can I cash in? Like what's the hot trend I can cash in? Or what are you're like the Kiss of comics where you're like able to like come up with these different things that be like before Kiss, no one was putting their fucking band on lunchboxes, you know what I mean? But like now, but you're also a comic that doesn't sell merch. At least at the shows you've done for me, you do not sit around do merch. You don't hand out QR codes so they can get to your website. You pretty much do your act and then you're in the car heading back to wherever you come from. But like, tell me about like this marketing aspect that you kind of incorporate into your comedy.
I hope and I think it's like relatively naturalistic. I think it stems
Mhm.
from thinking of something funny and going, yeah, fuck it, I'll do that.
Mhm.
Like, uh, like Bret Raybould retires from comedy. That as a premise came from, I think it would be funny to do
Yeah.
that, not as
Yeah.
oh, this would get people out. And then after I thought of it as a funny
Mhm.
idea, I'm like, am I against that it helps get people to a
Mhm.
show?
Yeah.
No.
But even doing the Buble stuff, even retiring and doing the Buble, that's a marketing tool because you came out with a jazz album. And I'm not gonna spoil the comic special because I hope everybody who listens to this will watch your special. But like, it is amazing that your jazz special became number 34 on the chart. I'll say
Listen,
that much
hey,
about it. But that's another
listen.
marketing tool because your name's now in a whole different community of people who have no idea. Like maybe people who aren't into comedy but are into jazz, are like, who the fuck is this guy kind of thing. But you are
Yeah,
a
I wish I was better at it because I still think that album, I haven't had it, I haven't gotten it out there. Mark my words, Mark. That album will go number one at some point in my comedy career. I really believe it. I really believe once I get well known, and if I, I'm on a late night couch and I pull that album out and I say let's get this to number one, I can kind of see that, I really believe I think it's gonna be number one. It might not be this Christmas, it might be the next,
That's
but it will
awesome,
be
man.
number one in my lifetime.
I'll just do it.
The ideas just come from trying to think of something funny. And it's like I said, sometimes like funny ideas, those don't
Mhm.
work in stand up, but I could still
Mhm.
do them. And maybe they're slightly comedy performance art type of pieces or something.
Mhm.
But I just love doing those too. Cause I mean, I've always loved Andy Kaufman. Anytime I
Yeah.
found his stuff, I came to a little later, but he is this great reminder that you can do anything you want.
Yeah.
And I think it's really valuable for comics to think that way too. Like you can just do whatever you want.
Mhm.
And he certainly was unafraid to break boundaries on what an entertainer could do.
He
I mean, for
certainly did.
fuck's sake, he was doing my dream. He was wrestling women.
That's funny.
That'll be the
That's funny.
next special. Bret
Yeah.
Raybould wrestles women with
Women.
vitriolic intent.
I've done enough research to know that you've already named your next two specials. So I'm like, and it seems like it's top
I
secret
know.
and not
I
engaged.
know you. I've
So,
told. Yeah,
yes,
I
yes.
know.
So
You
now
know.
you
So
guys would book tours together. How did you guys do that? What was your angle to book tours? Because again, you're the more famous brother, but I don't know if I don't know if your name would resonate in some of these backwoods areas
no
of like
doubt.
the
No.
West
Yeah.
End. Yeah.
For sure. I have no delusions on. Don't worry. You don't going to be like, you're not that well known. I'm like,
I
yeah,
don't know.
I know.
60,000 views on YouTube is nothing to be.
It's nothing, but it's not like, that's just a eyeball on the internet that
Mhm.
how many of those have converted to buying a ticket or following my Instagram and then buying a ticket.
Yeah.
Um, my the way we did it was we would book reach out to a
Mhm.
venue, say, hey, can we do a show here? They would say yes. And if they did,
Mhm.
then start selling tickets and try and market the tickets online, ads, Reddit,
Mhm.
local newspapers. And, people they might come out, they're coming out mostly to see comedy. They're not really
Yeah.
coming out to see a Bret Raybould.
Mhm.
So I think that was like embedded into it, is like, that's what is great about stand up in some ways is people don't really go, I'm just going to go see music. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But they would say, oh, I'm going to go see this band or that singer. But
Exactly.
with comedy, people will go, I'll just go watch comedy.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's kind of great in that regard because you can sell some tickets, not a shitload, but
Mhm.
even if you're just a comic, people might just say, fuck it, I'll take a chance. And if you have
Yeah.
decent clips online, maybe those can sell some ticks.
As someone who book shows myself, I'm going to ask you, who is someone who is more efficient and more better at marketing. What have you found to be the best? Know how to sell tickets? That's something you said in an interview. So tell me, what was the best way you've seen to find to sell tickets for a show? What was the best one?
I would say having like a clip in the ad of the stand-up itself
Okay.
an actual like clip that is like, short, punchy, and good.
Hmm.
I think rather than just like people can watch a minute and go like, first off, they can grab them, and second off,
Hmm.
they could go, oh, okay, that was very funny.
Yeah.
Fuck it, this show is a good deal.
Hmm.
I'm not doing anything. Sure.
Okay.
And I think also having it listed in a lot of places can help.
Okay.
Like I said, like posted on Reddit or on Eventbrite and Groupon and
Okay.
the other
Nice.
ones.
Okay.
Because with enough sales, you can cobble together a show, and you don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't need a ton of sales to have a good show.
Yeah. Yeah. Now what?
Um,
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, what price point what have you found to be the best price point to use in order to
we would
maximize
charge,
profit? Yeah.
yeah, in between 10 and 20. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes 10 and 15, 10 online, 15 at the door. I mean,
Mhm.
this is just like a marketing thing.
Yeah.
It's man, but I always charge more at the door, and always
Yes.
in the online thing say you
Absolutely.
charge more. Like,
Exactly.
just because you want to incentivize people clicking
Mhm.
purchase.
Correct.
So I mean, I assume you clearly do that.
Yeah.
So
I
that's like
found
a,
$12. That's where I mean the shows that we run, $12 seems to be the price point that I've hit for this kind of thing. But we charge 20 at the door as well. So um
yeah, 50 at the door, bitch. Suck it.
um something that you have said that stuck out to me that I thought was very interesting, and I agree with, is you said my comedy outstrips my fame, which I agree with. Your
Oh,
level of your level of comedy should have the jokes you come up with, is Brian Jones included, Bret Raybould retirement comedy special. You should be enough to be headlining a rooms like at Helium, Philadelphia, or something like that. Tell me, what is it? Because I live in a city where very few comics make it to New York, and the ones that do somehow make it, and there's usually with a helping hand. Like there are people helping hands. So tell me, like someone like yourself who lives in the city, how are you able to what are you doing to get yourself into places like Comedy Cellar, Caroline's, Comic Strip, Broadway? Tell me like some of the things that you're trying to do, because you are an excellent comic in a city of other excellent comics. So tell me how this works.
sure. I mean, man, I'm trying to get better at being willing to just put myself out there. For so many years, I was the type of person that was like, I need to be beyond ready and perfect before being seen. And that's not true. You got to be willing to be. That's almost like a safety net for not putting yourself out there. Like thinking at some future date when you're a perfectly formed entity, then you're ready. But like opportunity begets more opportunity, which begets more ability to improve. And I think for me, it's like I have so many mental blocks on like reaching out, asking if I can do someone's show, to maybe like not putting a thing up online, and trying to move through those and get over those. And for me, like, yeah, I certainly personally feel like, oh man, like that, I weirdly don't have a huge lily pad of success in New York. There's, I'm not at like the Cellar and I hope it's not cocky to say, but I think I know I'm actually good enough to be in these rooms.
I agree.
I just have maybe not met the right people or had the right connections, and in a way that's not self-pity, I've also admittedly not put myself out there in the way that can more likely occur. So for this year, for me, on like a more like quote unquote success perspective, it's just like about doing the things that I really, really want to do, not being afraid of putting yourself out there. And I think the things that I really, really want to do, I think they could pop off, and maybe they'll pop off, and that'll bleed to the more excess. I mean, Race the Movie, the play, in my perfect vision, I'm like, man, this thing, like, man, I think we're gonna sell this script, and I would love to do a run of these shows, and I would love to be kind of the next like you know, like it's like an anti-Hamilton. Like it's like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
liberals watch and they don't necessarily feel good about
Yeah.
themselves because they get made fun of too.
Yeah.
Which no entertainment makes fun of liberals.
Yeah.
Like really, like because liberals run entertainment.
Mhm.
And I mean, we make fun of conservatives too. Like it's the thing where it's like it's the point is it's not partisan.
Yeah.
It's not angled like that. It's just comedy.
Well, yeah, which I think is why your clip is so good. It's because maybe this is the success of a political joke. Maybe this is maybe what we tell other people who want to touch political subjects like gun control, abortion,
Right.
religion, whatever. Like, is that when you do the Biden joke, you're making fun of Biden voters and you're making fun. If you just went after comparing Trump to a Mad Max car, then you would have 50% of the room laughing hysterically, and you'd be like, these people are making fun of us right now. We're the people that vote
Right.
for Mad Max. So like, but you're hitting the punching bag with both fists equally. You're not pulling one punch over the other.
And I think you should make fun of the thing that they would associate as your tribe first, even though I don't have one, but you should like, that's a way to disarm it is like, listen, I'm making fun of things that you would make fun of about me.
Yeah.
So yeah, clearly you're the one who wouldn't have a sense of humor if that's the case.
Yeah. I like that. Make fun of your tribe first. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, and this has been so fun and like
I'm glad.
Dude, I'm just like so impressed how much like true thought you put into this. I'm sorry you've like thought about and watched so much of my bullshit.
Not at all. Not at all. It was a big pleasure. It was a big pleasure. But this was awesome. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this. I'm so happy for your time. I know I took a 2.5 hour chunk of your day.
Oh, dude.
Thank you so much, man.
Dude, man, it really actually means a lot that you put a lot of thought into this. And speaking as someone who, as you know, pursuing stand-up, you can feel insecure about like, am I doing good stuff or does anyone even care? And the fact that you put like a lot of thought into it, it really meant a lot to me. And
thank you.
Not only your kind words, but like, yeah, man, like it just feels like, oh, like maybe not doing so bad if Mark, who did, look at some of my stuff, thinks I'm on a good track.
I think you're on a great
because you have good taste. And if you like me, it's because you're a genius. So just so self-involved.
That's all right, man. Well, I appreciate you being on here, man. Hang on. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll say goodbye.